at the early stages, it's a little bit easier, I would say, because the founders have, more of a hand in the hiring process. But as companies continue to scale, how do you kind of adjust with that level of transparency? Because as you get bigger, you might, change that a little bit. But how have you seen over time with that at larger companies? I'd be curious for each of y'all to touch on it a little.
Yeah, so I actually started my company off at a startup, then I moved to an enterprise org, and then another enterprise org before moving into the startup world. So just seeing the difference along the way. I think with larger corporates, oftentimes collateral doesn't get that refresh,
Mm,
and oftentimes there's less transparency. Oftentimes it's a bit vague. I
yeah.
think we're seeing a lot of change, and so to your point, Opal, early on, it's a lot easier to be transparent. Although I think maybe the skill in actually telling the story and actually taking the time more than anything to do that, that's something. So that's where I think hiring consultants, such as Jen and myself, we do this, right? So we have services to empower founders and leaders to get recruiting right and to tell their story right in the market. To your point around how do things evolve, I think unless you have a dedicated team supporting you with these initiatives, it becomes harder. So again, being really intentional about, I know that I need to plan and budget for a solid, recruiting team that isn't just, a hiring, or I guess like a sourcing engine, but, strategic talent partners that can also really help to deliver the message and the storytelling. We kind of hear about how recruiting has a lot of, I would say, overlap with marketing. And, that is also a portion that I think you need to see and vet in your talent partners, especially as you grow.
And one thing to build on that, and a piece that Neha said earlier about planning. So I'm not a professional consultant when it comes to hiring. I've actually learned a lot from Jen, and if someone is in that boat, I definitely recommend like bringing in someone like Jen or Neha. But one of the things I've seen when advising other startups is whether it's a big company or a startup, most of the time people are in kind of like hair on fire hiring mode. And the first thing consultant will tell you is like you have to think a little bit more holistically about like your hiring process, right? There are some fundamentals, like how are you positioning yourself, what's your every touch point can have an impact on you know the way your company is perceived, and whether people are going to be interested in engaging with you or not. um, but most of the time you're like, well, I need to hire someone yesterday, and so just like introduce me to a candidate, or like tell me how to like sell this candidate that I'm really excited about. In
Yeah.
reality, like you have to do the hard work. Like hiring is hard, and you have to think about it end to end holistically. The hiring funnel doesn't really end. Like even when you hire someone, that's not done, right? That person's going to come work at your company. They're going to have other people in their network they might be talking to the company about. They might leave at some point. And so it really is end to end, from the beginning of finding people and engaging with them all the way through to when they join the company. What is their experience?
A quick comment I'm going to make there is, oftentimes I see recruiting teams operate like a startup, even if you're a large enterprise. I think what happens is, yes, there's a lot more red tape. You can't say this, you can't do that, but you're still operating like a startup. So, some of my clients actually that work at larger companies, they still are in firefighter mode, even though they have more quote unquote resources. But, because recruiting is an you know there's always that race, right, as open roles come up, especially, there's certain seasons of the year as well where hiring picks up for some industries like finance and RSP season. And so, yeah, I think that firefighter mode is not really something that goes away when it comes to hiring.